Hi. So I think I might have actually figured out how to do this. So now I've enabled the comment section, which was my fault. And so I'm hoping that you folks should be able to ask me some questions. But yeah, it was a test round. I've had to delete the last video, so the quality wasn't great. So yeah, I'll try this again. I'm just going to cover some of the pros and cons again of a Neel 51. So apologies if this is getting a bit monotonous and boring, but bear with me. So I'm not a professional videographer or anything. So the pros, I was touching on the point that the fact that I think you get a lot of boat for the price, for the money that you spend on the Neel 51. I think it in order to get the same or similar level of performance with the space, I think you've got to start thinking about a semi-carbon and semi-GRP boat, which you're basically starting to go up to nearly double the price of the 51. So I think that has to be, one of the strongest things. It's phenomenal, the space. And sometimes, I think I'm kind of hitting on a con now, but I think the ship looks a lot faster than perhaps maybe some people might feel if they're coming from the monohulls of similar length. But I'd say, if you think about how much space, you're basically getting more than 3 times the space than you're getting with a monohull. So it's a bit of a no-brainer. And I'd say the simplicity, it's for what you can achieve with this boat. I think it's relatively simple, the maintenance and so forth. Whenever you look at anything like a McConaughey's 50, 55, 60, or which is a flybridge cat, and I'm talking about upwind sailing, upwind sailing ships. I've got a comment there from Steve. Thanks, Steve. It's great. Thanks for testing this. I kind of wonder if I'm speaking to myself or. But yeah, so basically what I'd say is, for the simplicity to sail and maintain this boat, I think it's pretty good. For the speeds that you can achieve without being a pro, constant regatta sailor, which I'm not. I didn't really consider myself a sailor much. For me, it was basically about moving my home and real out and out cruising. That was really my agenda. My connection is unstable, I'm being told. So I'm kind of running off my 4G here, so there's not really much I can do about my connection, folks. So I'm in Mexico, so unless I go and Cape Canaveral or try and get some decent connection, I think it's going to be a problem. Maintenance is one thing that I think is awesome on the ship, is the fact that if you're going to live aboard genuinely, and you're not having it as a holiday home, I think it's really nice being able to, the tech and engine room. I've got a proper workshop. In fact, it's basically like having a shed at the back, the bottom of your garden. I've got all my tools, all my bits and pieces. I know everything is. I know my maintenance drills that I've got to do. And even I've got a dive compressor in the skipper cabin, which I recommend, by the way. It's LNW. Even maintaining that, it's just really not a hassle because I can get around it. So I think that's a huge bonus, and I think something that you folks shouldn't overlook if you're looking for comparative, the competition. I think something that isn't really discussed at all, and isn't actually sold as being a pro of the Neel 51, is what I've mentioned again, is the upwind performance. You've got to remember, it's a little frustrating when I see videos of people comparing a Neel 51 with a Lagoon. It's a totally incomparable boat. You can't. There was a guy, I can't remember. It was a very intelligent analysis, I think, of on a YouTube channel. I've forgotten which one at the moment, but he was basically analyzing people that have crossed in the Ark and the performance of the boats. But the only problem is it's all downwind. So you can basically stand up and hold up a handkerchief and hold up a few of them, and you're still going to go downwind. In fact, actually, when I crossed the Atlantic, I met rowers, and the rowers are mostly surfing down the waves. So you know, I'm not saying that they're not rowing, but you know, a large part of that passage is downwind. In fact, all of it is. So what's completely negated is the fact that if you, for example, leave from El Hierro, almost certainly if you leave from port there, it's going to be all upwind until you get out into the Atlantic. So I think it's just totally incomparable. But in the same way, something else that I think is really important that I've seen some of the videos that people have just haven't, in my view, just have no idea about a ship in a seaway, is that this, so this, for example, this corridor that's behind me here, that gets down into that cabin. I think, I can't remember the name. It's a British guy, and I think his wife is British as well. Ruby Rose, I think it is. And they basically complained about how narrow that passage is in and out of cabins. Like, I mean, for me, that's a huge advantage if you're in bad weather or going upwind, which, let's be honest, a lot of these people aren't going upwind sailing. So I think, you know, you don't want to be falling that far. Yeah, it's a real advantage. For example, I've had my mum, when I hit pretty big swell and going upwind from the south of Gran Canaria to Las Palmas, and it was kind of after a storm, so the wind wasn't crazy, but the swell was, and there was a Jolly Roger ship type, you know, one of those typical, you know, people get drunk and pay loads of money to stand around and talk to each other. And then, you know, a day catamaran, which, you know, really wide, loads of deck space, typical to try and, you know, pay a few bucks and then get drunk again. But those two guys are ahead of me. Obviously, they're not transoceanic boats, but, you know, both of those guys weren't that far away from me, and they, you know, they were panicking. You know, it was, so like I said in my previous video, it's quite flattering and extremely comfortable. I have my, you know, my mother, who's, you know, getting on a bit, like she's, you know, her mobility is getting reduced, and she was very comfortable sitting here. And in fact, she said that she had the best sleep that she's had for years that night when we got into port. So yeah, what I'd say is under anchor as well, I think, although the feeling is different, there's a guy called Wiley Sharp, if you all don't know. He's a guy that sells catamarans for Denison Yachting, and he made a comment saying that he feels that he doesn't recommend the trimaran, and it actually mentioned the Neel 51, because he said when he looked at the top of the mast, that the top of the mast moves more than the catamaran that was, you know, adjacent to it. Now, what I could say is, first of all, I just think that's straight up wrong, and I live aboard, so I feel like I'm probably better informed. And there's actually a friend who made recently, who's on a Helio 44 over here, a Phantom Peugeot, which is a Helio 44 and a new one. And we went out just for a quick day sail, and, you know, just went out, have fun, and, you know, get drunk and do the usual stuff under anchor here in Mexico. Yeah, basically, I find it quite weird, actually, for me sitting at anchor there. It was kind of, whereas there's normally a nice flow for me on that Helio 44, it's kind of like the feeling was, it was like a sudden jolt whenever we, you know, sitting there and really almost no swell at all. So that's my view. I think the best thing to do is don't take my word for it. Go and try and get a sail of a Neel 51 and a similar type catamaran. Everybody's going to be different, but remember that if you want to achieve the same objective of the upwind sailing performance, you're immediately going to start reducing your saloon space, because you need dagger boards or that center boards. So yeah, that's that one. I'd say the other thing is in a storm, and I was saying in my previous live video that was crap, that I was sailing with a Katana 53, I think it was, sorry, and we were going down the coast of Morocco, and we hit really bad weather, and basically I dropped completely the main and just put the foresails, kind of half roofed them out and just sat there, whereas normally you'd be heaving to. Now remember, it's self-tacking jib on this, so heaving to is going to be a lot more difficult, right? What I've done, I've actually installed jammers, and I can show you that in another video, to stop the self-tacking in case I get into that situation, which I haven't done yet. But I found that if you point almost ridiculously close to the wind, you'll still make progress, and it'll actually be more comfortable. And let's be honest, your destination is almost always coming from where the wind's coming from. That's just sod's law, the way sailing is. So it's actually more comfortable. And rather than heaving to and drifting with the current, or if you're doing it right, you're actually making ground. And so it's quite nice and not demoralizing to wake up and after a few hours and actually find that I'm ahead of my friend without even trying. It's great. So that's one thing. And then I mentioned in my other live video, and sorry if you folks have tuned in again, I'm obviously trying my best here, but I'm loving the aircon at the moment. I don't know if anybody's been in Florida midsummer, but it's getting like that here. It's very tropical. And the first thing is mosquitoes come in tropical weather, so I've got all the windows closed, so that's great. I'm seeing some questions coming in here for Tona Rec. I'll start to that in a second. So with the aircon, the beauty is you can just keep the windows closed. So, but the problem again is if you want the aircon and you want to run the aircon at anchor, not in port, then you're going to need a generator, the genset. And I have to say, my girlfriend that's here with me, some days we just walk into the boat and we're like, my God, I'm really glad we've got the aircon. It really makes a huge difference, especially when you're in the port, because at anchor usually there's wind coming down the ship, yeah, so that's a big difference. So now I've actually got some comments, and thanks folks for your comments here, and that's my whole agenda here. I'm just simply trying to help your curiosity and help all of us in this lockdown and pandemic. It's getting quite tiresome. I'm sure you're finding it all the same. So hi to Without Worries watching from Bavaria. And so we've got so you can heave to in heavy winds. Yeah, you can. So what I've done is I've set up, if you can imagine, you've got the self-tacking jib, and in the center of where the sheet goes into the self rail, I've actually attached some lines, okay, some sheets, and then run those into jammers, which I've installed jammers at the end of the rail. So if I want to forcibly keep the sail on one side, I close the jammers. So I go on one tack, close the jammers, and then just like you do normally when you heave to, just go the other way, and it'll just backwind the sail. And what I find is on this boat, which is really interesting, it has a keel. So there's a 1.8 meter draft, and it has a keel. So you have the benefit of when you're drifting a little bit back, you have that turbulent flow that you're kind of looking for with a keel boat. That's the whole point. Well, there's a lot of different reasons why you heave to, but you're getting that turbulent flow, which causes the slightly worse waves to chill out a little bit. It's quite a weird sensation if you've ever done it. But what I've found is that you don't need the mainsail to do it, because generally, if I was thinking, I've done this only in test scenarios, but like, I mean, from anything up until 50 knot, 50, even 60 knot winds, we're generally trying to keep sailing. And I think that's the beauty about this hull design. It's phenomenal and phenomenally comfortable. Like, you're looking out the window, and it's it looks a bit mad, but at the same time, you're still making ground, which is beautiful. So I hope that answers your question, Tona. One Punch Man on the sea. Okay, thanks, Cook. And Tona Rec, the slick. Yeah, the slick is basically what I'm talking about. That slick, that turbulent flow when you're heaving to is it's pretty handy. But at the same time, you're not making ground. So, if you read, there's loads of cool books. I've got loads of interesting. One I recommend is called Storm Tactics, of which there's a few different named ones. But I think all of you right now, if you're interested in cruising lifestyle, should go and read Lynn and Larry Pardy's. It's a husband and wife couple that were living aboard cruising for some 45 years. Almost, crazy amount of time, and extremely capable sailors. And they're in a monohull, and they were using a parachute type drogue off the bow, and using a bridle to point that approximately 30 degrees to the swell, and so that they take the brunt of the big hits on the bow, which makes sense, right? Because that's the way the boat's set up in the first place. But I've got a few questions from people before. I've got a Jordan series drogue on on board is quite heavy, and also I think we have to be wary about the stern cleats. There's going to be a lot of pressure on those stern cleats if and when you deploy it. And in that regard, a friend Matthias, who has also the Neel 51, who I've met recently in St. Martin before all the virus stuff kicked off, and he's actually installed really quite significant, like massive cleats, really, with holes in so they can attach. They've got these big industrial springs that you can't even close with your hands or open with your hands, but obviously with the force they'll do the job and try and some of the snatching. But the whole point of a Jordan series drogue, as I understand it, is the little conical cones trying to reduce that snatching in between each trough. But listen, you guys, you could spend months learning about storm tactics. What I would say is, although yes, it's important to prepare for those situations. Like I said, this ship is very flattering, and you can get away with some stuff that I think a lot of people would think you're a total lunatic going out in. So, what I say that I can't remember where I read this, so please don't gun me down on this one. But I think it might have been the parties actually. But you're 83% more likely to be becalmed if you go on a circumnavigation than you are to hit bad weather. Although it doesn't feel like that, and it doesn't felt like that for me since I left bloody Malta, but I can say that I was extremely glad. As you can see, folks, from my video when I was in Jamaica, wasn't exactly a warm reception. Apart from the Coast Guard, who were wonderful, but you can see it was not nice, and I didn't know when I was going to get fuel, when I was going to get food, and we've gone back to the old school where I'm sailing, because any diesel I have, I need it to make water, and that's it. That's the only reason I really need a diesel. And if I was becalmed, and have that huge asymmetric spinnaker, which I have it on a furler. It's the one that comes from, if you spec it from the factory, it's the incidence spinnaker. And I could basically do a whole video on just how I set that up and with my experience on this ship. But I'd say the single easiest thing that I've done is get the furling system, because the snuffer, which is like a sock that goes over it, was just love. So yeah, I think if you're going to invest in a spinnaker, which is expensive, but also it has, for 2.5 days really, from my transit from Jamaica along the coast of Puerto Rico to where I am now, which is near Tulum and the island of Cozumel. Across that whole kind of Caribbean sea, I was running with the spinnaker. And so when I didn't know if I was going to get in okay. So I was basically on a fuel preservation exercise to the maximum element. And at some points I was just sitting at literally 2.5, 3 knots, but I was still moving. And I think it's really, if you're thinking about doing circumnavigation, seriously think about getting a reacher, an asymmetric style. Now, my friend Matthias, I'm going to answer some questions in a second, but my friend Matthias has parasailers. And of course, everybody has, it's the beauty of sailing. It's like golf or, shooting or whatever everybody's into. But personally, I feel that the logic for having a downwind sail like a parasailer, I feel that the logic for having a downwind sail like a parasailer is negated, because if you have a multi-hull that reaches so well, you can actually, turn up into the wind a bit, more miles, but get more speed. So your velocity made good in the end will actually mean that you get to your destination quicker. It's velocity made good to the course is what I've talked about this in some of my other videos. So let's see what we consider. So drogue, what would you consider a sea anchor, or would you consider a sea anchor or a drogue? Yeah, so I've answered that one, Steve. So I actually have a Jordan series drogue, the single most important thing is to practice deploying it in pretty shitty weather. But I haven't really got into weather where I thought, oh god, I really need to deploy this. And bear in mind, I have been genuinely not trying to be tough guy. I've genuinely been at 60 knot winds and quite significant seas, and I didn't feel like it was necessary. I would say that if I was going upwind in that swell that I was coming, if I had to turn around like sail across the Atlantic now by the Azores, I'd probably have used for the drogue, I'd say. The other thing is on multi-hulls, generally the consensus is that you throw it off the back, and you don't put a bridle and try and get the waves up in your grill. So throw it up the back to stop the surfing becoming so fast, and then allow, if you're single-handed, the autopilot to get you some rest. It maintains control. But like, I mean, I don't think the hull speed of this boat is something like 18 or something knots. So you should be able to control going down the waves. But of course, you're trying not to pitch pole, which I think the design of this boat, there's so much buoyancy in the forward aspects of the hulls that your chances of pitch poling are probably pretty slim. But I don't know. I haven't been in a survival situation as far as the size of waves. I'd say probably the worst situation I've been in, the only time I've been genuinely concerned for myself, was that actually coming down a place called Jorg Far, down the coast of Morocco. And I'm not intending to offend anybody that's Moroccan or got Moroccan relatives or friends, but from a sailing perspective, I think a Tangier Marina next to Gibraltar is kind of nice, but otherwise I'd be making if I can for the weather, try and get straight for Madeira and then do the hop down to Las Palmas from there. It's can be pretty rowdy. So next question, Psychonavigations asked me, what about redundancy of the Neel versus a cat? Only one rudder, keel, engine. What are your thoughts on that? Yeah, that's one actually. I've got a friend who's got I met here, made friends with a guy that's got he's got a Lagoon 440, so it's a slightly older one, and his idea of he loves this ship, absolutely loves it, but he's like, says, I couldn't possibly imagine going to a boat that's only got one engine. Well, I can understand why he thinks that, but the point is that the first thing is that sailing boat, I think if you've got the right quiver of sails and you've got the right setup and the experience, you should be able to get out of almost any situation and even sail into port. With the self-tacking jib, like I've explained, you'll be slow into port. If you put your fenders out, it should be all right. But you could even, you can sail into port with this. It's the maneuverability is phenomenal, and you definitely don't need two engines. You can see from the video that I've docked in Sardinia, got the bow thruster. Why not use it? But I would say that the bow thrusters don't work in 20 knots of wind because there's so much freeboard on this ship. So probably, unless you're being blown onto the quay and you don't want to leave again, I think you should probably think if it's 20-25 knots or more, it's going to be a tough day for you to moor up. So usually what I'll do, particularly if I'm on my own, is just anchor up and try and get somewhere and snug and hidden away. Anchor up and just let it pass. It's easier dropping anchor anyway than taking the ship into port. Just drop the anchor as long as you've got a good setup. And I know it's a very contentious one, and everybody gets very emotional about when you ask about what anchor setup you use and do you use a swivel or whatever. But I can tell you what's worked, and it's worked in 60-knot winds for me, is the Rockner Vulcan. It's not the Rockner with the roll bar. It's the Rockner Vulcan, and it's worked amazingly well for me. The wind shifted 180 degrees while I was on board. And unfortunately, I didn't record it, but it was unbelievable. It was literally textbook stuff. And 180-degree wind shift, and it was 60 knots as well. And the anchor didn't move. So I know it works. And it's what I say to anybody that's interested in this boat. Try and stick to the setups that I've done, because I can guarantee that it works. And I can show you the problems that I've had with it. And if you need my help, if you do commission a boat, I'm very happy to help out. So yeah, the next question. So what about redundancy of the Neel versus cat? Okay, so only one rudder. Well, the one rudder issue, because the rudder is protected by the keel, albeit a sacrificial keel, there's a view, and I could take you to look at, for example, the Boreal, which is an Arctic exploration vessel, versus a Garcia. So they're the two competing aluminium centerboard type vessels. All right. So one view is having the extra rudder is great for redundancy, right? But there's a valid point though. If you hit something, it's usually if the rudder's sticking out away from the keel, you're likely going to, especially if it's ice, for example, you're going to damage one rudder. So it'd be nice to be able to unlink it. But at the same time, with a monohull, I figure that, if you're going to power up, and it's going to have more control, basically. If you've got 2 rudders, you're going to have more control. So it's a matter of opinion. But my view is that if you have 1 rudder and you have your keel in front of it, unless you're going, backwards, which is possible, you could, I think the most obvious thing that comes to mind is when your anchor drifts onto a lee shore. That would probably be the only time I can think that the rudder is going to take the impact more than anything else. But at the same time, both your rudders, if you have 2 rudders, are going to hit. So, and the other thing is about an engine redundancy. Almost all the time, sometimes, yes, I agree, you might need your engine, and I had some really interesting comments recently from some chap that's bought a 51 and is going to put in an electric setup as far as propulsion goes. I'll talk about that in a second, but I think most of the problems that you have are with fuel. All right, so it's with fueling or with energy. Generally not, so if you have 2 engines, I agree, yeah, you can move filters around and carry extra spares, but it's twice the maintenance. And depending on what your setup is, I get the point when you come into port, and I'm familiar with, essentially mooring cats, but it's just, frankly, it's not an issue on this boat. The only thing, as I've said in the other video, is frustrating is the way that the seal is designed for the Volvo D275, which I have on board, which is the stock propulsion. And I think it is frustrating that you can't drain all the oil out, because I could simply get my diving kit now, put a new seal on, let the seawater come in, and then just extract all the seawater, put more oil in, and extract the oil again, rather than having to haul out for what takes me 20 minutes if I can do it, under the water. So yeah, I'm not sure if I'm waffling a little bit there, but so that's the engine, and that's my thoughts on that one. So I personally, I'm in 2 minds about the rudder for a monohull, but and at the moment, I think if you're going to take an impact on a single vessel like this one with the keel box in front of it, it's really probably going to be a lee shore, and then your survival situation then really depending on the wind, isn't it? So let's see, same question, safety question. What is your plan if you lose your rudder? Probably hit the whiskey or sherry. Depends what's in the being facetious, but yeah, I think it's an important aspect. One thing I would really love on this boat as a backup, and it would be cool if you could set it up, is the Windvane steering, but I doubt that it's going to be possible with the coach roof, and plus it's also going to look like a monstrosity on the back of it. But it would be quite cool to have a backup of Windvane, and that would also presumably help act as a rudder. What I would say is that the rudder is pretty big on this, because to get that hull to pop, you're kind of slightly overshooting a little bit. So you need that round rudder to counteract, and it's so important that you don't get too much weather helm. It does really affect, if you overshoot that main, you get too much weather helm, and it does really affect your speed, because obviously rudder's going sideways, and the armors are stopping what you would normally notice to be in a monohull being too much pitch or roll. Sorry. So yeah, what's the next question? Yes, but mono can have a wind vane. Could you? Yeah, that's a valid point. I would be really interesting to investigate that. Of course, then I've got to go spend some money just to investigate it. But depends what you're going to do with the boat, folks. I think you can end up spending a lifetime and a lot of money to make a boat perfect. But you've got to be honest with yourself about what you're going to do with the boat. I don't think I would want to sail in this ship at the moment to the Lofoten, for example. Or my girlfriend's from Argentina. Let's not hold that against her. But down in the southern, really those latitudes, I would seriously think. I think probably the most important thing is the sea cocks are below water level. So when you start getting into really ice cold water, I think that's probably going to be more of an issue than the rudder. And also, I believe you have to change your propeller. I'm not trying to make out like I'm Skip Novak or something, but I believe you have to change a non-folding prop, and 3-blade propeller is better for ice. And So I really question whether or not you're going to take a vessel like this down there. You want an aluminium center, perhaps, or yeah, if you're going to go to somewhere like that. So you could spend hours and hours, years, basically perfecting a boat. But I think out of the box, I think you're getting something quite impressive. So what's the next question? What would you change in the boat? Good question. I think I've done most of the changes, but I think I would change to, as I've said, not the sail drive. I would try and have a shaft drive. I did, and I have done, changed the float switches for the bilge pumps. They're sitting on plinths. I would definitely change in the stanchions. There's Dyneema. I would probably use steel because it doesn't chafe. I would have prepared better for the 50-60 hertz issue. I basically just had to make the call that, the stock microwave, that it started to make funny smell and act a bit weird when I connected to the 60 shore power. I basically just had to make that call. So now what we do is I unhook the shore power if I want to use the washing machine. So my washing machine washer dryer was a Candy, pretty budget to be honest, machine washer dryer, and the washing machine works, but the drying aspect has been nailed by the 60 hertz. So I don't really know. I think the only way you can reset it is if you see a model of a washing machine or whatever it is that can handle 50 hertz, because so far my experience is that there's a lot of 220 volts in the marina, and this is quite a small marina. I wouldn't say it's particularly big, and they've catered for the 220 volts. Dinghy, I'd seriously recommend you all, particularly if you're thinking about buying a dinghy for your own boat. I've done a lot of research in this one, and I've come to the conclusion that I think I'm probably going to buy an additional smaller dinghy which can sit in the transom, although it's not pretty, from a company called Portland Pudgy, and it's hard dinghy which is also a life raft. And the point is, my life raft is stupid. If I was going to do it all again, I'd probably end up, if you're going to do inflatable life rafts, get two smaller ones, because as I've said, I've been a lot of the time on my own, and mine's a 10-man life raft. So trying to flip the life raft over, if you've done any sort of sea survival, it's definitely not a one-man job. It's pretty tricky, especially in high winds. So this Portland Pudgy, it's basically an active life raft in that it's hard, so it can't be deflated by sharks' fins and so forth. It's got having when I have friends on board, it's a little bit weird for them to have to rely on me if we have fun the night before to go ashore and get the sail, and also the aspect of having a second backup for another redundancy of the dinghy. I have found that although the Honda is an amazingly resilient engine, my advice to you all, if you're thinking about buying, I've got really bad hearing in my right ear, but if you were thinking about buying an outboard, 2 strokes are actually better with the seawater. They're a little bit more durable. But now that I've figured out the nuances of this Honda, which is essentially where you connect the fuel to the outboard itself, it's pretty bulletproof. But yeah, like I said, so for the Portland Pudgy, I think no matter, even if you're on from a 38 foot to 51 foot, there's a strong argument for the Pudgy, because you use it every day as well, and you can put your your supplies, not some other random person who's basically trying to make profit into the life raft. So off topic, but still very curious, what's your background? What made you change your life and go sailing? Originally I was a medical doctor, and I changed that, went into the business world, yeah, I always had, I promised my best friend, I had quite a tough life when I was a little bit younger, and I always promised my friend that if it ever got really tough, that we'd just sell everything and get a catamaran, and sail the world. Well, unfortunately, I was just a really bad flu, actually, sitting in bed one Christmas, and I was sitting looking at the ceiling, and just said, well, what am I beasting all of this for? I could basically settle up everything, sell everything. If it didn't work out, I could probably flip the ship. But I just said, listen, there's a lot of naysayers in the world, and I just committed to it, put the deposit down on the boat, and then tried to to make everything else work, and it did. So do you know what? I'd never look back. As far as the statistics, if you read the party books, some 3% of cruisers are still cruising after the first year. Some 3%. But I'm definitely, for me, this is definitely my life. And I think people ask me on the beach or whatever, what is it that I love about it the most? And I think probably the best thing is not having neighbors. I generally, I love the privacy of it. It's kind of terrorizing for me a little bit at the moment, like for example, my dog, we have a little thing called Sarekis. It's like a marsupial animal and looks like a big rat here in Mexico. And of course, it's like candy to a kid for a dog. And yeah, so unfortunately the dog, she went off. But some of the local people, they come out and they're being unnecessarily hostile, and it's one thing I really don't miss about having neighbors. And I lived in London for a long period of my life, and yeah, the only time you really meet your neighbors in a city is whenever you've got a problem with you. So yeah, so I think that's one of the most beautiful things. But the sense of freedom is amazing. If you look at the survival situation that I was in Jamaica, okay, or even before that, Puerto Rico. I decided to leave Puerto Rico because the food it was declining. The quality of the food was declining. And so I thought by sailing to the Dominican Republic that it would, my chance of survival was probably going to be a bit better because the food is all made there. But unfortunately, when I was sailing, the borders closed. But the point is, I could make that decision. I could move my home and all my bits and pieces without packing a single bag. I moved, and then I sailed into Haiti, which, as I'm sure you all know, is notoriously dangerous. And actually, I have to say, it looked like paradise, but it was dangerous. And there were people on shore when I tried to anchor in an island called Isla Vache. And the police and Coast Guard, who are actually pretty cool, came and said, listen, you probably don't want to stay here anyway because it's too dangerous. And I got that impression. And so after 4 hours of being at anchor, we sailed on and eventually ended up in northeast Jamaica, where I had particularly a megalomaniac police officer, Marine police, trying to flex and show the world that he's a big deal, but he wasn't in the end. But anyway, the beauty is that you can just simply move your home, and it feels like home to me now after 2 years. So I'm not sure if I'm waffling, but I think that maybe has answered that question a little bit. You can use a Seagroad as an emergency rudder. Yeah, you can, as long as you have bridles. That's right. And hi, Manav. I answered some of your questions recently. I recognize your name. So yeah, I think let's see this. So back to the 51. What about the build quality issues that are so often mentioned? Little things like furniture, doors, hatches, leaks, and big items like plumbing, electricals. All right. So listen, I think you're all smart, all right? There's usually a history behind most stories. I've heard stories of a guy who put, it's alleged that he put 2 jet skis on the back of a 45 Neel, all right? And so a jet ski, if you're unfamiliar, can be up to 800 kilos. So that's nearly the guts of 2 tons on the stern of a 45. That's what I'm told, all right? I don't know whether you want to believe it or not, but that's what I was told by someone else. So that puts some context to what you've seen in the videos that I also saw. And I addressed this actually when I went for the test sail. I addressed this with Eric Brunel, who's the managing director of the company. And I wanted to see and hear his side of the story on this one. So anyway, I'll leave that story aside. What I can tell you is what I know, and from my experience, I was frustrated at first and a little surprised. Sorry, my girlfriend's just making some tea here. I was a little frustrated and surprised at first, but apparently, compared to everyone else that has bought a new boat, this is Eva, it's my girlfriend.
Hi.
So apparently, everybody else that buys a new boat, the dog's coming as well, that my hassles were quite small, right? So usually commission a new boat takes about 18 months, and I would say I was around about the 12 mark until I was satisfied. But I went into this quite blind, I didn't, you know, having being a doctor and, you know, in business as well afterwards. You know, at the beginning, I basically gave up a 9 to 5 for a different 9 to 5 job, because, you know, I need to rely on myself. So I think, ironically for me, it was quite a good, you know, to tailor off from my previous rat race to get my head around. I'll be totally honest, and I'll open my heart to the internet, that you feel a little bit guilty at first. You feel a little bit guilty about, you know, maybe not really having a purpose once you start. And I know that some of my other friends that have gone to the cruising lifestyle feel the same. And I think you kind of get a taste for that feeling when you're in quarantine at the moment. It's kind of, it can be a little, you know, sometimes you kind of struggling with what's really a purpose, you know. So yeah, that's one. But the furniture, I'd say, I don't know whether you're noticing, I'm sitting in a €200 lazy boy that I got in where did we get it? In Sardinia.
Yeah.
Sardinia, yeah. So I just went into a hardware store, bought a seat that was on offer, measured it up, obviously, and it's not stuck to the ship at all. You know, it's not screwed down. So I can use this as another pilot berth, basically. So put my feet out, turn around, and dog sits at my feet, and even in bad seas, great. You know, once it goes completely back, it's locked in. It's not quite as high as the original seat, but the original seat was polystyrene. So if you're going to spec up a 51 and you're going to commission one, folks, my advice to you was just ask them not to put in the seat. Just forget that seat. It's total crap. Yeah, if you're going to do any sort of solo sailing, but anyway, even I'm here in the marina, and it's really nice that this is kind of like my office here at the nav station. I've got my laptop going just like it is now, and I can see the way by, and I've got my seat, and sometimes I have a little afternoon snooze. So yeah, so furniture, that's the only furniture that I really can say was bad. Now, what I think is important for everybody to understand, that you're getting a ship for this size of boat for not as much money as a competition, okay? And this stuff here that's behind me is a laminate, all right? So if you screw, the dog's kicking off again, but if you screw a screw into this and the screw is pulled out, you've then got to put some sort of glue, or you just got to screw in a different place. And that's typical of a laminate that's probably MDF underneath and then a laminate on top. And I had the problems with that in the port cabin, the cupboard, and somebody had just stuffed the cupboard and it's actually pulled out the hinges. But I wouldn't say it's unreasonable. The table in the saloon and the table in the cockpit, at some point, once I get to somewhere cool that I can do it, I'm just going to ditch those, because the dog jumps up in them and scratches them with her paws. And I think the outside cockpit, the other thing is friends smoking or whatever, and if the wind comes and, you know, it burns the table, then it's just a nightmare with laminate. It's gone. You know, they're burned. Yeah, I actually have. I think you'll see from my transatlantic video. I have a friend, Alex, who's Ukrainian, and I was trying to teach him. You know, he asked me to give some help on you know, blue water sailing, and yeah, he was trying to break some ice for sundown at my hatchet on the table, and has now left big lines. So, but anyway, it didn't, you know, it's not the end of the world, because I know that at some point I'm going to probably change the saloon table and the cockpit table. Apart from that, I don't really have many foibles at all, really. There's not too much now, so I wouldn't worry about that too much, folks. And in fact, it's pretty much identical to the furniture is pretty much identical to what's in the Helia 44 and Fontevraud. All the multi-hulls, bar like a few smaller companies, are all from La Rochelle, France, and they all, you know, do the same strategy as far as furniture. So to say that the laminate furniture in this is bad quality of fixture and fittings, you could say it's identical for all production catamarans and multi-hulls. So I hope it answers that one. I did have problems, which I conveyed on a very early video, that they spec'd up suction hose. There's suction hose for bilge pumps, but they spec that for the high pressure side of the water pump, and any sort of bend in it, you start to get a bulge, and then eventually it just bursts. So you need, it's a bit more like garden hose with the structure, the wire mesh in the hosing. But right, so what does that cost to do? Sure, it was a disaster, but that's £2, maybe for the length of hose that I needed. Just take off the Jubilee clips, job done. You know, like, I mean, it's not the end of the world, guys. And if stuff like that is going to be stressful for you, I seriously recommend you don't think about living on board a cruising sailing boat, because you know, there is maintenance, and you know, I didn't have any decent experience with maintenance. Obviously, I love motorbikes and I can strip a motorbike down, but as far as electronics and all that stuff, it took me a while, and my handover was about 30 minutes for the ship. So I was really on a crash course and investigating things pretty quickly. So furniture doors, hatches is a good one. Under warranty, I've finally agreed that I had the flush hatches, which are from, there's a company called Goitot. I think it's Goitot. Now, if you ever see a product from this company, my advice to you is go the other direction, because every single thing on this boat, including the helm, which I've now fixed properly myself, I lathed a piece of, you know, the central hub for the brake, but everything from that company, and they're unbelievably arrogant. They just totally ignore you if you need any spare parts or anything. So the hatches, that the original, they're Goitot or whatever they're called, and they've agreed under warranty that they're going to be replaced because they were leaking a little bit. I wouldn't say, you know, it's not ridiculous considering where I've come from, but yeah. And in the warranty period, I'm changing the hatches for sure. I've noticed on Matthias's boat, which is I think it's called San. Yeah, he doesn't have flush hatches, and flush hatches, I think for me, is quite a big deal. Obviously, if it's a make or break, you're going to go with the old school hatches, but flush hatches when you're walking around rather than stub a toe, I think makes good sense. Of course, then if you look at the Garcias and Boreals, even around hatches, they have a rim to reduce the flow of water down over the hatches. So listen, you know, you do whatever you want, but yes, that is something that I did have a problem with. Let's see. So the next one is Old Slow. Thanks, nice to see you. I wish I could see you as well. We could maybe get a Zoom going on. Cruise in space with. Have you seen the 45, and do you think it is suitable for liveaboard? I have seen the 45, and I do think it's suitable for liveaboard. It's also very quick, and it's very fun to sail, just like the 51. I'd say, and right after I say this, well, maybe it's a bit arrogant to think that, but if I was thinking and not sure if I'm ready for the lifestyle, I would probably go for a 45 and the entry to trimaran. If you're happy and everybody, your wife's happy, your girlfriend's happy, and and the dog's happy, and you have the budget for it, then you could maybe think about going for the 51. But you can pick up. I've seen some 45s in the market, a very well spec'd one for about 380,000 euros, which I think, for the performance, the space, the one deck living, a taste of what the 51 is like, I think it's pretty good value. Now, don't forget, folks, I'm going to put the stipulation that it's an upwind sailing boat. You know, you can achieve very significant upwind sailing speeds, and it's not a catamaran that's just basically, as I call them, a little bit brick-like, and they've got the wide hulls. You simply, if you're going to catamarans and you want to sail upwind, you need dagger boards or center boards, and immediately your saloon and your saloon space goes down, and the corridors to the heads and the berths are, you're going to have that dagger board casing. It's going to be smaller. You don't have that on this, and it's also significantly cheaper than the dagger board catamarans. So anyway, hope that answered that one. Is that the two of you racing on those bikes? It's me racing on the HP4. Yep, that's me, but not Eva. So what about the weight? Are you very cautious about what you bring on board, or can you be a bit relaxed about what you bring in? Absolutely. I think you've got to be realistic. And even when I have 600 liters of fuel, and not like, maybe if I have 50 liters of fuel, it doesn't affect the performance at all. Really, genuinely does not. The only thing I noticed actually is if I'm in very bad weather, if I put the water maker and put 600 liters of water in the tank, it's actually more comfortable upwind. But I don't notice any, it's a bit like ballast, right? I don't really notice any performance at all. So it does beg that question. If you can afford the genset, you know, the generator, and you can afford the aircon, probably you're probably going to think about wanting to go for it. And I stipulate with that again, there's new technology. Since I bought this boat more than 2 years ago, that you can actually have 24-volt aircon at 600 watts consumption, which means you can off your batteries. So if you have a good alternator, you could argue that you don't need a generator at all anymore. And the other thing I've noticed when we were sailing from Jamaica, it was a little bit more stressful having to account for the diesel. So I wish that I had aboard a 24-volt water maker. And Matthias, my friend, he has 100 liters per hour, and it runs off the batteries. And he's got beast set up. He's got lithium-ion batteries. I've got gel. He's got another maybe 1,000 watts. I think he's got more than his solar. But his setup, he can run his water maker off that. He runs one induction plate. He's bought like a little induction plate just in thingy. But I basically pretty much do everything off the batteries, apart from air conditioning and generating water. So I call the cat barges. A couple of friends not really happy about that. Yeah, I can understand. I do. I think, the reality is you can't have everything unless you want to defy physics. You need narrow, thin hulls, and usually they've got to be long if you want to be a performance multi-hull. So if you go and have a look at, for example, let's see, a Nutrimare. They're just, I think they're slightly less than a queen. Yeah, I think they're slightly less than a queen-sized berth. But the port cabin on the 51, it's a super king size. I just don't even know any other. It's super king because you've got the bit where the escape hatch is, and you can just put a few rugs and stuff and make it all the same level. So you can have a super king bed on a ship that costs less than half of the equivalent, where you need a king size bed. So you have to make the decision. I think the fact that you can sail upwind well in this, as well as perhaps a 60-foot monohull, all right. Your rigging doesn't need as much maintenance. To explain, so for example, like my friend that's on the HH66, they have on the shrouds, they have pressure sensors on the shrouds, and it's a piece of basically like a really strong elastic. And I can't remember the proper technical name from it. Scott Rocknack, who's an absolute genius and an amazing salesman, have probably got the right name for them. But basically, you can test if the rigging can handle what you're doing with the sails. Now that's going to be a lot more maintenance, of course, and you start going into the performance world. But I would basically, how would I put this? The Neel 51 and equivalent to, let's say, a sports car. I think if you want to go for all the bells and whistles and get a Lambo or a Ferrari, which is probably not going to be that reliable, but going to be quite, really good fun and out-and-out racer, great. But if you want something that you can take in the city, you can go on a country road and you can smash out some big miles on, and it's extremely comfortable, you're probably going to go for a Porsche, aren't you? Like a 911 or something like that. It's the only way. For me, it's more race bikes. So if you want something reliable and that goes forever and it's a fast, good, comfortable machine, it's a Honda. But but I think this equivalent ship is probably like a BMW superbike, like you can see in my profile. I think you get a lot of performance, a lot of comfort, and you ticks a lot of boxes. Basically, the all-round average, in my view, is that the 51 is the way to go. And there's for the users that don't know, I presume because you're on YouTube, you probably see a channel called Sailing Yacht Ruby Rose. And they've gone around a lot of catamarans, and they went and saw the new 47, and they were like picking at holes in a brand new delivered boat, and it wasn't even really commissioned yet, that boat. But putting steps and stuff off, I'd probably be quite upset if it was my boat show. But again, I just say it's a word of warning for you're probably feeling this anyway at the moment with all the the pandemic stuff, but there's a lot of misinformation out there, or just differing opinions. The only way to simply do it is just to go off and sail a boat. And I've got a pump going here, a shower pump. Let's see what else. Do you have any kind of lightning? Sorry, I missed one before. So circumnavigation asked me, what are your plans for the next couple of years? Don't have any. It's the whole point. I just basically wanted to circumnavigate, but I wasn't expecting to be in Mexico already. Really curious to see Havana, on Cuba in general, but that's not going to happen for a while in the hurricane season here. Jamaica, don't know, I'll go back the ways, not really. I was curious to see Dominican Republic, but my reception there, I basically had a rifle in my face and told to piss off. So I don't think I'm going to go back there again. I've done my best, and I have to say there is lightning on around me at the moment. I've done my best to kind of protect myself against it, apart from a genuine, from what I can see, a genuine, yeah, great, the protection, yeah, a little bit of thanks for that. But as far as doing Faraday cages and stuff, like I looked at this stuff, and to do it properly, from what I can understand of the physics. Now, Matthias, who's on another 51, and I think its name is San, he is actually an astrophysicist, and he knows all this stuff, so you probably better ask him. But from what I can see, from doing a Faraday cage on a boat and grounding it, it's you're talking about 30,000 euros. And on top of that, this is one of the most important things I would say to you all. Don't get a carbon mast on this boat. It's a total waste of money. And also, if lightning strikes carbon, it obliterates it. So now you have no instruments, you have no power, you can't start your engine, and you can't sail either. So for a cruising boat, I just blew the carbon mast out. Not interesting for me. You know, if you're genuinely in a pickle, having carbon's a bad idea in my view. But obviously, like I say, if you want to smash out some big miles and you want a performance catamaran and something sexy like an HH55 or, you know, a gunboat, obviously they're going to come with carbon rigs. One of the things I'd say is the shrouds on this boat. The shrouds come kind of like quite aft. In fact, more aft than the spreaders. So downwind reefing from the mainsail. Although you can use the reefing lines as long as it's not too windy and you haven't left it too late to reef. I think it would be quite nice to have what my friend here is American. He calls it a luxury line, but we call it a downhaul in the UK. But quite nice to have a good downhaul. And you know, if you know, I would probably I've got the non-performance rig in this boat. I've got 2 reefs. I'd probably put another 2 reefs in. So one for survival situation for the mainsail. To keep going upwind better, but one in between. Let me get this right now. In between the first and second reef for going downwind. So you can see from my Transat video that I would have been quite nice to have a reef somewhere in between, and that would have meant that I could have pushed the boat just a little bit more. But you know, you start pushing the boat too hard, and you're going to start, when you get into port, you're going to start having to have a big job list. So I think, you know, pushing the boat for not Transat for a good 24 48 hour passage, you can get good average speeds up about 10. If you want to push it 10.5, maybe. I'm talking on flat seas, I'm not talking with surfing. But if you're doing a Transat, I'd probably try and keep your average speed about 8 safe. So average. Let's see. So late to the show here, but the gist I get is that you're still really happy about the 51. Yeah, I'd say so. I think the only thing is, just like racing motorbikes, I think everybody always wants more power and more speed, but you can't have the best of both worlds. And I think, you know, for the money, there's no question in my mind for this. It's an absolute bargain, really. You know, I'm not getting any commission or any agenda for saying this, but I think really it's good value for money, folks. You know, and as long as you accept that, you know, the sailing lifestyle and living aboard, you're going to have to do a bit of maintenance. I think, yeah, it's pretty good value for money. Load cells, thanks. That's the ones. Old Slow is just reminding me what the things on the shrouds are. I've forgotten what they're called. So Michael Petefield has just said, hi James, can you sail your 51 single-handed? Yes, I can, and I have been doing until I met my girlfriend about 8 months ago. I was sailing mostly on my own, I'd say, for about 16 to 18 months on my own. Yeah, and you can see from, if you ever look at some of my other videos, Michael, you'll see that even trying to help out people, give an understanding. Although it was a calm day, which if you're single-handed coming into Tamura dock, it would be smart to try and do it on a calmer day. But yeah, I do it all the time on my own. Yeah, so it's great having a dog as well. Are you still happy with the unprotected helm? Yeah, absolutely. I know Matthias again, who's on the 51. He has the cover. First of all, I think it looks a bit ugly. Sorry, I'm a bit vain, but I do think it looks a bit ugly. And I don't really understand what everybody goes on about this on the internet. I see everybody complaining about, for example, if you go and have a look at after this video on the McConaughey 60, and it's got a fly bridge. where all the winches are. Now, for me, that's just not interesting if I'm single-handed, because how can I run from a flybridge all the way down to the side deck to throw a line or to, you know, fix a fender in a hurry? You just can't do it. So I'd say that's the beauty of this helm. And if you need protection, just go inside and navigate from inside. Like, I mean, I can. It's bizarre because you can put the autopilot on, right, and then just come in through the doors, close the doors, the noise of the sea goes down, and it's hard to describe sounds for me personally when I'm on long passages. Sounds are a tink tink, a clinking, drives me nuts. But yeah, so I think a protected helm is just not necessary. It's perfectly good. Occasionally you get sprayed. I think I mentioned earlier on that when I was in Morocco and I had, you know, pretty scary beam seas that were breaking, I did get splashed quite a bit then, but I just went downstairs and put on my foulies and, you know, boom, Bob's your uncle, clip in again, and away you go. So any more questions, folks? Smash them out now. So because I'm running this, are you happy with the level of the craftsmanship of the Neel 51? I am now that I know the foibles of them. What I would say to you all is that there's a Neel owners forum. Go and check out everybody else. Don't just take my word from it. Go and have a look at everybody else's views on the different boats, because all the problems I've had are pretty much identical to what everybody else has had. I've been actually, I think, by a couple of small foibles. I've been pretty lucky, really. I just keep on top of it. The point is, keep on top of the maintenance. Do yourself a favor. Be nice to your future self, and follow your maintenance drills, and you should be all right. You know, it's not really that hard way to change the oil in the gearbox and whatever. Where is the Neel 51 forum? I'm gonna see if I can try and find that one for you. Hang on a sec. I'll post a link. Give me 2 seconds. I'm doing 2 things at once here. Yeah, there we go. So I've got it. So I'll just post the link now. 1 second. Yeah, there we go. So the link now. Boom. How's that? That's pretty handy. And any other questions, folks? I'll just sit and drink my tea for a little bit while you smash out some questions, and listen to the creaking of my lines, and hope the lightning and the thunderstorms doesn't hit me. Ah, Scott, hi. Just jumped in. Good stuff. Nice share. Thanks, Scott. I was just talking about you. So for those that don't know, Scott Rocknack is the sole agent internationally for HH catamarans. And in my view, I'm not blowing smoke up your ass, Scott, but he's by far the best salesman I've seen in any sector. Jesus. Yeah, definitely. You get that award for sure, Scott. And he's also got a decent sense of humor as well, which I'm lacking. But yeah, good to hear from you, buddy. And I hope you're well wherever you are. And I know you've got some big miles coming up ahead of you before you, if you manage to escape the pandemic, the virus. What else have we got here? Thanks so much, James. Really helpful. Not at all, Toner. Any plans to fit in some track days, or is sailing going to be your gig for the meantime? It's one of the things that I really miss. I have to say, Mike, is definitely, I miss my track time. And next to my brother, kind of already used to live near Norwich, and there's Snetterton racetrack there, and sometimes I wake up, dream that I imagine that I'm back on the 1000RR BMW and Snetterton racetrack. It's probably the quickest track that we have in the UK, and yeah, I miss the superbike. But unbelievably, this one will blow your mind, because I'm sure a lot of people that are sailors are quite into the motorbikes as well. But I was telling Scott, who's joined us, that I bought in the supermarket. So this is, for me, this is a mad concept. But in the United States, I know you've got Walmarts that just have absolutely everything. But for me, here in Mexico, it's mad. There's a supermarket chain called Chedraui, who have amazing quality food here. I was not expecting. I'm just a bit ignorant, but the quality of the food here was amazing. But you can walk in, and I did, and buy a pretty good dual sport motorbike, 200cc motorbike. Okay, suspension's not amazing, but it, still can do good trail riding for $600. Like, I mean, come on, that's pretty amazing. You wouldn't even get a secondhand one for that in the UK. So that's the track days. Like I say, come down for a visit in Brazil if it's feasible from the Caribbeans without crossing the Atlantic. Yeah, it's definitely feasible. I've got to go through the intertropical convergence zone. if I'm going down south. So maybe leave it for a little bit of time. But thanks, Tono, for the invitation. I appreciate that. But I definitely will be hitting up Brazil at some point, and hopefully doing. I'm actually quite interested to go to Colombia as well. Yeah, if Scott's still there, I'd quite like to have Scott on board. I love what I love actually is having real, you know, as I said, like high-level sailors that very. Scott put me in touch with somebody in the British Virgin. He's skipper of an HH66. And it was just wonderful speaking to somebody that really knows their skill back to front and has sailed hundreds of catamarans in competitions. And although I'm not personally that interested in competitions, I'm sure, yeah, fun, but not really my thing. And in as far as sailing goes, but you know, certainly motorbikes definitely. But yeah, so it's just lovely having. It's nice to speak to all of you and see your comments coming back. So it's glad that we finally managed to get this thing sorted. So, any last minute questions? I'm going to go and have my cup of tea, and might have my dinner soon. Usually try and get a bit of exercise in as well. So I hope you're all doing, wherever you're all running in from and watching, I hope you're all doing okay in, you know, with the virus. There's clearly a lot of misinformation, a lot of frustrating stuff going on, and you know, there seems to be that the general public are policing themselves in this time, and it's unprecedented times. We know that. And I'm sorry, I'd be devastated to hear if any of you guys have lost family or whatever. So yeah, just be safe and get a sailing boat and get away from it all. The most risk you have is being in a densely populated place. So don't be in one. Live in a sailing boat. But yeah, we could argue that I had a problem getting my supplies and victualling the boat. But let's see what's got. Yes, keep me in mind, delivering to HH next month, then free. Great. So once the pandemic is over, I'll be having the world's best salesman on board my vessel. Probably a pretty good sailor too. Looking to set foot on a 51 one day by Old Slow. Be safe and have fun. Thank you very much. Thanks, Old Slow. And then it's an outrageously long name. Thanks for the feedback. Be safe out there. 2 wheels down, 2 sails out. Like that one. That's good. That's the bill of this, folks. The dog went for a walk, and I'm going to smash my tea. And I'm glad we finally got this working. So if you have any other questions or whatever, again, you can catch me on Instagram. Although Instagram's not really my thing normally, but it's useful for messaging without having to give out my telephone number, frankly. So if you have any questions, go to Carry On Sailing. It was what you search on Instagram, and then you can instant message me. And I try and do my best actually to take video calls if I've got the data. Yeah, you can catch me there. But again, like I said, with this YouTube thing, unless you're you want to show your ass, which I'm sure you guys don't really want to see my ass, or you have very good profile shots, and you want a soap opera sailing, which I personally don't want to watch that. I'd much rather learn something or try and I love to teach, so I'd try and help out people understanding about the 51. But I don't think you guys there's enough soap opera type sailing episodes out there for you to get yourself stuck in. What I would say, I would recommend one, the one that I strongly recommend to you all, and a pretty cool couple, and they're on a budget, pretty tight budget, and they're an Australian couple, and they're called Free Range Sailing. And Troy, who's the skipper, is clearly a very able mechanic and pretty good at maintenance. But on top of that as well, he has the same agenda as I have. Although they're making a salary off their YouTube channel, I think Troy's real agenda is just trying to help people and understand what the you know, to be safe as well. On that one, just before I go, actually, I want to warn you all, I don't know whether or not you're thinking to buy a new multifunction display, but you can see from the last video that I released that there's the open CPN HDMI cable from a laptop or something to a waterproof touchscreen display at the helm, and save yourself a heap of money. You know, these guys really, in my view, it's debatable. Some people say it's unethical how much money they're making, because I've I've had nightmares trying to set up. You know, I don't. I'm a stupid person, but although my girlfriend debates that one. But I think setting up, yeah, exactly, yeah. But setting up this B&G display, jeez, it's been pretty tough. You know, I actually think it would be harder to set up this display than to set up a you know, an aircraft. Neel Owners Group, Matthias, who's on another 51, we're even trading what our ideal autopilot settings are. And like, I mean, you know, honestly, there's about 10 different functions on the autopilot, and yeah, nightmare. So try one of these, and mostly do Euros with no limits. Oh wow, okay, Mike, you're with no limits. Yeah, I like no limits. I think they do pretty good track days. And Tona's just signing out there. All right, folks, I'm off. Smash my tea, get some dinner, and catch you on the other side. Like I said, you know, you don't need to subscribe anymore, so I don't care about YouTube's policy now that I can do this. So subscribe if you like, you know, whatever. But if you want to instant message me, you can catch me on Carry On Sailing on Instagram. I'll do my best to help you out, and anything else, and can wish you all best wishes, and be safe. And yeah, carry on.